Well, if the signature image from George W. Bush's presidency is going to be that video of him continuing to read the book, My Pet Goat, to school children while the 9/11 attacks were still in progress, why shouldn't there be a $500 million George W. Bush presidential library? Our third story on the countdown, that is the fundraising price tag, $500 million, which will buy you a lot of historical spin. Sources telling the New York Daily News that Mr. Bush and his loyalists hope to raise that unprecedented figure, part of which would fund the actual library, the rest for one of the so-called think tanks. This one, according to a source described as a Bush insider, would be called the Institute for Democracy. It would hire conservative scholars and, quote, give them money to write papers and books favorable to the president's policies. Sources say the fundraisers would solicit mega donations of $10 and $20 million apiece from cash cows, such as wealthy heiresses, Arab nations, business leaders. The location at Southern Methodist University in Dallas still needs to be pinned down, which is especially important, according to one source, since, quote, you can't ask people in Dallas for $20 million until they are sure the library won't be in Waco. The rest of the cash would come from smaller donors who could cough up only $25,000 to $5 million each. Joining me now, the founder and editor of the HuffingtonPost.com, also author of On Becoming Fearless, Arianna Huffington. Thanks again for your time, Arianna.
Thank you, Keith.
When the fundraising goals for the Clinton Library were announced, $100 million at first, then $200 million was mentioned, the right wing went nuts. He's trying to whitewash his own history. He's trying to rewrite the history books. In that context, what would any president need with $500 million for his library?
Well, this has been, without a doubt, the most disastrous presidency of modern times, so he obviously will need a lot more money to whitewash what actually happened. I mean, can you imagine the Iraq War wing? What's going to happen? Will visitors be given rose-colored glasses before they enter it and have flowers thrown at their feet? Really, it's going to be very hard to whitewash this presidency, and maybe that's why they think they need $500 million.
Visitors to that wing, Arianna, would be greeted as liberators. But are we seeing, in terms of this, as a bigger picture than just this one library, could we be seeing a tipping point here? Are we going to need a federal law to cap spending on presidential libraries? Because by the year 2050, could we not have half a dozen presidential libraries and think tanks that are spending millions to try to prop up the image of their namesakes, trying to rewrite history for men who have long since ceased to be part of the political picture?
Well, Keith, as you know, we've been told again and again by constitutional scholars that money is speech, and therefore we'll never be able to cap donations. But what we need to demand is transparency. We need to demand that the donors, including the mega donors that you mentioned, to this fundraising feast will have to be known to the public. It is unconscionable that right now you can have donors, captains of industry, wealthy heiresses, and Arab nations giving $10 to $20 million, as has been announced, without the public knowing who they are. After all, this president may be a lame duck president, but he's still the president. He still has an awful lot of public policy that he can put up for sale at the White House, and that's why we need to know who they are and what are they getting in return for these huge donations.
Obviously, we have no formal announcements being made. These sources were simply talking to Tom DeFrank of the New York Daily News, whose stories do tend to pan out pretty much the way he writes them. Nevertheless, but are the supporters of George Bush wise in even revealing off the record plans for a presidential library of this kind of dimension right now in this point in this presidency?
Well, it shows how unaware they are of what's going on in the public mood at the moment. But at the same time, if they're going to be about to launch a fundraising effort, they have to announce it. And the question is, what's going to be the end result of that? I think there has to be a real public outcry about anonymity. That's the one thing we can demand. Because after all, you may remember, even with Bill Clinton, when you had the disclosure that Frank Rich's ex-wife, Denise Rich, had given $450,000. When that was disclosed after Bill Clinton pardoned Mark Rich, there was an enormous amount of outrage. So the question here is, what are they going to be getting, these donors, in exchange for the big bucks that they're going to be giving to the library?
And I'm just going to say a few words and just throw you this softball and you swing as hard as you want on it. The George W. Bush think tank?
Well, you know, it's actually kind of funny because, after all, you can imagine a Ronald Reagan think tank, because you may disagree with his policies, but there was some philosophy, there was some theory behind it. George Bush has been all over the map. He started against nation building, then he was for nation building. He was pro-preemptive war, now he's for diplomacy. There is no real consistent theme except circumventing the Constitution, mistrusting international conventions, and basically not believing in the rule of law when it suited him.
Arianna Huffington of HuffingtonPost.com. As always, Arianna,